My grandmother is 82 years old, 4'11", and the single most dangerous person I have ever met, and I am including in that count 2 guys I knew in the army who defused actual bombs. I found out exactly how dangerous on a Tuesday, when a florist showed up at my apartment door holding an enormous funeral arrangement lilies, the works, the kind you'd put on a casket with a card that read, in my grandmother's unmistakable spidery handwriting, for the death of my grandson's social life. Rest in peace, you absolute hermit. Grandma Rosa. I stood in my doorway, 33 years old, holding a funeral wreath for my own personality, while the florist, a woman about my age with paint on her hands and an expression of profound second-hand embarrassment, said, "I'm so sorry. I tried to talk her out of it. She was very persuasive. She told me you'd find it funny. And also, that if I didn't deliver it personally, she'd find a way to make it worse." And I believed her. You believed her because she's terrifying. She told me she once made a man cry at a city council meeting. I didn't ask for context. That's real. That happened. He'd voted against a crosswalk. The florist's mouth twitched. She also told me, she said, clearly trying to maintain professionalism and clearly losing, that you're a catch who's given up, that you haven't been on a date since the Obama administration, and that I should, and I'm quoting the work order here, get a good look at him while you're there. You never know. I closed my eyes. She put that on the work order. She put that on the work order. It's typed. She typed it. Your grandmother knows how to type a strategically devastating work order. This is the story of how my grandmother weaponized the floral industry to fix my love life. And the genuinely upsetting thing is that it worked. Let me explain Grandma Rosa, because you need context to understand the scale of what I was dealing with. I'm Theo Marchetti. I'm 33. I'm an accountant, yes, I know, settled down, and I am, by every available metric, a hermit. Not a sad hermit, a content hermit. I have a job I'm good at, an apartment I like, a sourdough starter named Gary, and a social calendar that consists primarily of Gary. I'd been single for about 3 years. Since a long relationship ended in the most boring way possible, we just sort of ran out, like a car coasting to a stop on an empty road, and I'd discovered that I quite liked the quiet. No drama, no risk. Just me and Gary and the spreadsheets. My grandmother considered this an emergency, on the scale of a house fire. Rosa Marchetti raised me, mostly. My parents traveled for work. Grandma Rosa was the constant. She taught me to cook, to swear in Italian, and to never trust a man who doesn't finish his plate. She buried my grandfather 12 years ago, and has spent the time since running the entire extended family, like a small, ruthless, deeply loving crime syndicate. She is 4'11". She has opinions about everything. She is, I say this with total love, a menace. To give you a sense of the woman, at my cousin Gina's wedding, when the best man's speech ran long and started to bomb, Rosa stood up, said, "Sit down. You're embarrassing the family," took the microphone, and delivered a better speech off the cuff that made 3 tables cry. At a city council meeting, she once reduced a grown man to tears for voting against a crosswalk near the elementary school. Children walk there. You coward. Do you want to explain to a mother why her baby is a hood ornament? And the crosswalk was approved by the end of the night. She has, on more than one occasion, locked feuding relatives in rooms until they reconciled. The family pantry at her house is less a storage space than a diplomatic facility. When my Uncle Sal refused to speak to his brother for 2 years over a disputed lawnmower, Rosa invited them both to dinner, locked the deadbolt, and didn't unlock it until they hugged. They hugged. People always hug. Rosa has a 100% success rate, and she knows it, and it has made her dangerous. And for the last year, she'd had exactly one project: getting me, her hermit grandson, back into the world. It started gently. "Theo, my friend Maria has a granddaughter. Very nice, a dentist." I declined. "Theo, the girl at the bakery asked about you." She hadn't. "Theo, I'm not going to be around forever, and I'd like to see you happy before I go." Is that so much to ask? Deploying her own mortality, which is below the belt even for her. I deflected all of it, lovingly but firmly. I was times fine. I had Gary. I had the quiet. I'd done the love thing, and it had coasted to a boring stop, and I decided I preferred a life that couldn't disappoint me. That was my mistake telling her I was fine. Because Grandma Rosa does not accept fine. Fine is a red flag to her. Fine, in her view, is what people say right before they die alone, surrounded by a sourdough starter. She told me once, gripping my face in both tiny hands, "Your grandfather and I had 41 years, and I would not trade one of them for 100 years of fine. Fine is what you say when you've stopped trying. I did not raise you to stop trying." And then she'd kissed my forehead and stolen the last cannoli, which is the Rosa Marchetti method in miniature. Devastate you emotionally, then commit a small theft so you can't stay sad about it. So she escalated to funeral flowers, hand-delivered, by a florist she'd specifically selected and briefed. I should have known the flowers weren't really the prank. The flowers were the Times delivery mechanism. My grandmother doesn't waste a gesture. She'd hired a florist she'd already vetted, written a work order designed to make the florist laugh, and instructed her to hand-deliver to a catch who's given up, with the explicit suggestion to get a good look. The flowers were a Trojan horse. The actual payload was the woman holding them. I didn't figure this out until much later. At the time, I just thought my grandmother had spent $40 to call me a hermit via Lily. "Do you want them?" the florist asked. "The flowers. I can't return them. They're paid for. And honestly, they're nice. Your grandmother has good taste." She rejected my first two arrangements as insufficiently dramatic. She rejected arrangements. She rejected two. She wanted the third one to really say something about wasted potential. The florist shifted the enormous wreath in her arms. "So, do you want your funeral flowers? Or do I haul them back to the van and we both pretend this didn't happen?" And here's where I should tell you about her, the florist, because this is the part my grandmother engineered and I walked right into. Her name was Sophia. She had paint on her hands, not flower stuff, actual paint. I'd learned she was an artist who ran the flower shop to pay rent, and dark curls escaping a clip, and an expression that suggested she found the entire situation as absurd as I did, and was enjoying it more than she was letting on. She was, in the specific way my grandmother had no doubt clocked from across a flower shop, exactly my type, which is to say funny and a little sharp, and visibly unimpressed by nonsense. "You should come in," I heard myself say, "for the flowers are heavy. You should put them down. And I feel like I owe you something for the trauma of delivering my own funeral wreath. Coffee? I have coffee. I have a sourdough starter named Gary. I could make you something." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Your grandmother said you'd invite me in." "She what?" "On the work order. There's a note at the bottom. It says Sophia shifted the wreath, pulled the card, read off the back. He'll invite you in. He gets that from me. Say yes. The boy makes good bread." She looked up. "Your grandmother predicted this conversation. In writing, before it happened. I stood in my doorway holding the implications of that." "She's setting us up," I said slowly. "The flowers aren't the prank. Your time's the prank." She hired a florist she thought I'd like, and sent her to my door with a $40 excuse to stand here long enough for me to invite her in. Sophia was quiet for a second. Then, she did ask me a lot of questions when I took the order. Whether I was single. Whether I liked bread. Whether I minded a man who's a little boring on paper but interesting once you get him going. She winced. I thought she was just a chatty old lady. I did not realize I was being recruited. "You were recruited. We've both been recruited. My grandmother ran an operation on us." "Your grandmother," Sophia said, with what I can only describe as growing admiration, is kind of incredible, actually. "My grandmother is a menace. Those aren't mutually exclusive." She hefted the wreath. "So, the coffee, the bread, the grandmother clearly wants me to say yes." She looked at me, and there was a glint in her eye now, the glint of someone who'd decided to find out where a strange day went. "I'm a professional. I shouldn't fraternize with the funeral flower recipients. It's probably a conflict of interest. A beat. But I really want to meet Gary, so I let her in." My grandmother, 82 and 4'11", had won. And she wasn't even in the building. Sophia stayed 2 hours. I made her coffee and bread. Gary rose to the occasion, the show-off, and we sat at my kitchen counter with the funeral wreath, propped absurdly in the corner like a third guest, and we laughed about my grandmother, and then we just talked. The way you do when the strangeness of how you met has knocked down all the normal first conversation walls. She told me about the painting, that the flower shop was the day job, that she'd wanted to be an artist her whole life and had compromised into floristry because flowers were art that pays rent, and that she felt a little like she'd given up on the real thing. I told her about the accounting, and the boring breakup that coasted to a stop, and the 3 years of contented hermitude that my grandmother considered a medical emergency. Can I say something that might be too honest for someone I met 90 minutes ago via funeral wreath? Sophia said. We're past normal social rules. The wreath saw to that. I don't think you're a hermit because you like the quiet, she said. I think you're a hermit because the last thing ran out of gas, and coasting to a stop is the kind of ending that makes you decide it's safer to never start the car. She turned her coffee cup. I do the same thing with painting. I tell everyone I compromised into flowers, like it was practical. But really I stopped painting seriously because if I never finish the real thing, it can never not be good enough. Same engine, different garage. I looked at her, this woman my grandmother had mailed to my door, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 boring, content, safe years, which was times interested. That's a disturbingly accurate read for someone I met via funeral wreath, I said. I'm very perceptive. It's why your grandmother liked me. She told me I had sharp eyes and good childbearing hips, which was deeply inappropriate and also, I think, a compliment. I put my head down on the counter. I'm so sorry. Don't be. It's the most interesting Tuesday I've had in years. She was grinning. Your grandmother might be a menace, but she's a menace with a times hit rate. She got up to leave eventually, and I walked her to the door, and we both stood there next to the funeral wreath, in the absurd way you stand next to someone when neither of you wants the strange good afternoon to be over. She looked at the wreath, then at me. I'm going to be honest with you, she said. I have delivered a lot of flowers, birthdays, apologies, 3 actual funerals, a guy who sent his ex a bouquet that just said, I was wrong, which I respected. I have never once been recruited into a matchmaking operation via a fake funeral wreath. Your grandmother is operating at a level of the game I didn't know existed. She picked at the lily nearest her, and the genuinely upsetting part is I think she might have been right. About us being in the same room, about recognizing each other. She looked up. So, I'm going to give you my actual number, not the flower shop one, and you're going to text me, and we're going to find out if an 82-year-old can read 2 strangers better than they can read themselves. A beat. She probably can. She seems unbeatable. She's never lost, I said. There's a pantry involved. It's a whole thing. I look forward to hearing about the pantry. And she wrote her number on the back of the funeral wreath card on the back of Times Rest in Peace. You absolute hermit Times handed it to me, and left, and I stood in my apartment holding my own funeral notice, with a beautiful woman's phone number on the back of it, and understood, with total clarity, that I had been comprehensively defeated by my own grandmother, and that I did not mind even a little. I'd love to tell you we fell instantly in love, and my grandmother got her victory. It wasn't quite that simple, because I'm me. And me means I got scared about a week in and tried to coast the whole thing to a boring stop before it could start. But first, there were 2 dates, and there where the whole thing actually happened after my grandmother had merely arranged for it to be able to. The first one, Sophia picked the place, a tiny dumpling spot she loved, 8 tables and a line out the door because, she said, I want to see how you handle a restaurant with no pretension. You're an accountant. I need to know if you're secretly stuffy. I passed, apparently, by eating an alarming quantity of dumplings and arguing with her about whether a soup dumpling is technically a soup or technically a dumpling. It's both, which is the entire miracle of it. A position she shared, which is when I knew the date was going dangerously well. She told me about the painting properly that night, the real version, not the rent-paying one. A gallery show in her 20s that went badly. One cruel review that called her work competent but timid, and how that single word, timid, had gotten into her like a splinter and stopped her from finishing anything serious for years. I paint the first 80% of everything, she said, and then I stop. Because 80% can't be timid, 80% is just unfinished. It's only when you finish it that someone can call it that. She shrugged. So I have a closet full of 80% paintings. Safe forever. Never finished. Never failed. That's exactly what I do, I'd said. I just do it with people instead of paintings. I get a relationship to 80%, and then I find a reason to coast it to a stop before it's finished enough to fail. We'd looked at each other across the dumplings, two people who just discovered they ran the identical software, and something clicked into place that no funeral wreath could have engineered. My grandmother got us in the room. The dumplings did the rest. The second date I picked, which was a mistake, because I picked a nice restaurant white tablecloths, a wine list with opinions, and Sophia took one look at it and said, "Oh no, Theo, this is a coasting restaurant. You picked a place where it's easy to be boring on purpose, so you can convince yourself it didn't work." She was right. That's exactly what I'd done. She marched us out to a taco truck and saved the whole night. And I thought, this woman sees the boring stop coming before I do, which is, for me specifically, either the best or the most dangerous quality a person could have. It was the best. But it took me one more scare to figure that out, because I'm me, and a week in I got scared and tried to coast the whole thing to a stop anyway. We'd been on 2 dates, real ones, no wreaths involved, and they'd been good. The kind of good that's actually dangerous. And so naturally I started doing the thing I do, pulling back, going quiet, finding reasons it was complicated. She's an artist. I'm an accountant. My grandmother set us up. That's a weird foundation. It's going too well, which means it has further to fall. The whole boring stop apparatus, firing up right on schedule. Sophia clocked it immediately. Because of the sharp eyes my grandmother had hired her for. "You're doing a thing," she said. On date 3, which I'd been about to find a reason to cut short. "You've gone quiet and you keep checking your phone like you're hoping for an excuse to leave. You're trying to coast this to a stop, aren't you? The thing you told me about. The car on the empty road." I opened my mouth to deny it. "Don't," she said. "I do it too, remember? Same engine." So I recognized the sound. She set down her fork. "Here's the thing, Theo. I almost didn't deliver those flowers myself. I almost sent my assistant. And then your grandmother called the shop. She times called the shop. Personally, to confirm I'd be the one delivering. And I thought, this old woman is trying so hard to get her grandson to not give up. The least I can do is show up." So I showed up. And it turned out to be the best Tuesday I'd had in years. She held my eyes. "I'm scared too. I gave up on painting because finishing it meant it could fail. You gave up on dating because starting it meant it could end. We're the same kind of coward, but your grandmother mailed me to your door because she refused to let you coast. And I think I don't want to coast either. Not with this. So I'm asking you to not do the boring stop thing. Just this once. Just see where the car goes." I looked at her, and I thought about my grandmother, 82, calling a flower shop to confirm the florist personally, running an operation to save her grandson from a content, safe, coasting to a stop life. And I thought about how much effort it is to love someone enough to embarrass them via funeral wreath. "Okay," I said, "no coasting. But for the record, this is the most aggressive matchmaking in the history of my family. And that's a family that once locked 2 cousins in a pantry at a wedding until they admitted they liked each other." She mentioned the pantry thing. She seemed proud of it. She engineered the pantry thing. Of course she's proud of it. We went and confronted Grandma Rosa together, about 3 weeks in, which is its own story. She opened her door, 4'11", took one look at the two of us standing on her porch holding hands, and her face did not register surprise. It registered times victory. The smug, total victory of a general surveying a battlefield that went exactly to plan. "Ah," she said, "the hermit and the flower girl. Come in, come in. I made cookies. I knew you'd come." "You knew we'd come," I said. "Grandma. You sent a funeral wreath to my apartment to insult me into dating your florist. And it times worked," Rosa said, with the serenity of a woman who has never once been wrong. "You're holding her hand, on my porch. 3 weeks. So who's the menace now? Sit. Eat a cookie. Sophia, sweetheart, you're too thin. Eat 2. Sophia, who had folded into my family with terrifying ease, ate 2 cookies and said, "Mrs. Marchetti, I have to know." "How did you know?" "You met me for 1 flower order. How did you know I'd be that we—" Rosa waved a hand like the answer was obvious. "You had paint on your hands. A florist with paint on her hands is a woman who wanted to be something else and settled, and didn't stop wanting. She nodded at me. And him? The same. Big quiet boy who settled and didn't stop wanting, and won't admit it. Two people who gave up on the same kind of thing. She shrugged. 82 years old. Smug as a cat. You put two people like that in a room. They recognize each other. I just had to get you in the room. The flowers were the room. She bit a cookie. I'm old. I don't have time for subtle. Subtle is for people who think they'll live forever. Sophia looked at me across my grandmother's kitchen table. And I looked at her, and we both understood that we had been comprehensively out-strategized by an octogenarian who'd read us both correctly off a single flower order and a typed work order. She's incredible, Sophia whispered. She's a menace, I whispered back. Both, Rosa called from the counter, not even turning around. I'm both. Eat your cookies. That was 2 years ago. Sophia paints again. That's the part I'm proudest of that. Somewhere in the not coasting, she started finishing the real things. The painting she'd been too scared to complete because finished things can fail. There's one hanging in our apartment of an absurd funeral wreath in a doorway, which is either a love story or a threat, depending on whether you know the context, and which my grandmother has demanded a copy of for her own wall. We got married last fall. Grandma Rosa, 84 now, gave a toast uninvited, mid-reception, by simply standing up and taking the microphone from a confused best man, in which she took full and complete credit for the entire relationship, the marriage, and, preemptively, the beautiful babies, which I expect soon. I'm not young. She is insufferable about it. She has earned the right to be insufferable about it. She mailed me a funeral wreath and got a granddaughter-in-law out of it, which is a return on investment no financial advisor I know could match. And I'm an accountant, I'd know. The funeral wreath card is framed in our hallway for the death of my grandson's social life. Rest in peace, you absolute hermit. Underneath it, Sophia hung a second frame with the line from the work order, the one at the bottom that I didn't see until Sophia read it to me in the doorway. He'll invite you in. He gets that from me. Say yes. The boy makes good bread. She knew. She knew the whole thing, start to finish, before either of us did. She read two strangers off their hands and their habits, and engineered a Tuesday that would put them in a room. And then she sat back and ate cookies while we figured out what she'd known all along. Gary, the sourdough starter, for the record, is still going, and made the bread at our wedding, and is the only member of this story my grandmother has no opinions about, which after 2 years I've come to understand, is the highest compliment Rosa Marchetti can pay anyone. Sometimes the bravest thing in the story isn't either of the two people too scared to start the car. Sometimes it's the 82-year-old who's buried a husband and watched her grandson give up on joy, and who decides she doesn't have time to be subtle and mails the whole problem a funeral wreath. Rest in peace, my social life. You were a casualty of the best ambush of my life. What would you have done if someone who loved you got so tired of watching you give up that they pulled off an elaborate, ridiculous scheme to force you back into the world? Have you ever been comprehensively outmatched by a relative who saw what you needed before you did? Tell me your story in the comments, and if you have a Grandma Rosa in your life, tell me about her too. If this one made you laugh, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.